Dinesh D'souza is a filmmaker, author, and commentator. Born in Mumbai, India, Dinesh came to the U.S. as an exchange student and graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Dartmouth College in 1983. Since then, D'Souza has had a prominent career as a writer, scholar, and public intellectual, and has become a renowned filmmaker with his top-grossing documentaries, 2016 Obama's America and America. A former policy analyst in the Reagan White House, D'Souza also served as a John M. Olin Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and the Robert and Karen Wishrain Fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. He served as the president of the King's College in New York City from 2010 to 2012. Called one of the top young public policy makers in the country by Investors Business Daily, D'Souza quickly became known as a major influencer on public policy through his writings. His first book, Illiberal Education, publicized the phenomena of political correctness in American colleges and universities and became a New York Times bestseller for 15 weeks. It has been listed as one of the most influential books of the 1990s. So I'd like to welcome our speaker. I think it's got cut off, but our speaker tonight, please join me in welcoming Dinesh D'souza.
Thank you very much. I am delighted and honored to be here. There's such a wonderful roster of speakers at this conference, and so I'm thrilled to be part of that company. I came in from Washington, D.C. today with my fiancée, Debbie. We're actually 2 weeks away from getting married, so it's a big a big moment for me. And I also, as I think about our very peculiar moment in American politics, my mind is thrown back to the late 1970s, 1978. I came to the United States as an exchange student from Mumbai, India. I remember for the first time the airplane descending on New York City and looking out the window, and I saw the skyline of New York, and I saw the Statue of Liberty out in the water, and a very strange feeling came over me that my life from that moment on was going to be completely different. I knew in some intuitive way that I was moving from the margin of the world to the center. And I also knew that I was coming to a country in which, to a degree that I would have thought quite impossible, it would be now possible for me to be the architect of my own destiny. The promise of America is not just that this is a country that gives us economic opportunity, but it allows us to be the architect of our own life. It allows us to be, you might say, if our life is like a blank sheet of paper, in America, you are the artist. In America, your decisions, your main decisions about life, where to live, whom to love, whom to marry, what to believe, what religion to practice, these are decisions that you, the individual, make for yourself. So this, to me, is the American dream. A dream of the self-directed life. And American conservatism, to me, is the protection of this dream. What are we conserving? We're conserving, paradoxically enough, the principles of the American Revolution. Ironically, as conservatives, we are conserving a kind of classical liberalism. But we're also living at a time, a very perilous time, and one that I feel I've experienced to some degree personally. I want to fast forward now almost an entire generation to about a year ago, in which I stood in a federal courtroom and heard a bailiff bark out the words, United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza. And as an immigrant, I have to tell you that that sends a chill down your spine. I was actually under indictment and accused by the U.S. government of breaking the campaign finance laws, exceeding the campaign finance limit, which I did by giving a college friend of mine, Wendy Long, who was running for Senate, $20,000 more than the campaign finance laws permit. So in that sense, it's true, I broke the law. But justice is not simply a matter of did you break the law, it's also a matter of proportioning the penalty to the crime. Justice is also a matter of making sure that other guys who did roughly the same thing get approximately the same penalty. Right about the time my case was making its way through the court, another fellow, this is an Asian Indian guy named Chatwal. We Asian Indians appear to specialize in campaign finance violations. Well, this guy gave $180,000 in straw donations, meaning putting someone else up to give the money where is actually his money, to Hillary Clinton and a whole group of Democratic candidates. He was also guilty of witness tampering, and he openly boasted about being corrupt. He said, you got to buy the politicians, otherwise they won't do what you want. And this guy, going before a federal judge, gets no prison, no confinement, and I, by contrast, am sentenced. The Obama administration wanted me in federal prison for up to 2 years, but a Clinton appointee judge sentenced me to 8 months in an overnight confinement center on the south side of San Diego near the Mexican border. Now, this was actually, for me, a very eye-opening experience. Initially, I was elated at having beaten the prison thing. I went on Megyn Kelly, and I was very happy about not being sent to prison. But the first day I showed up at this confinement center, the fellow behind the counter, the guard, he goes, well, what prison are you coming from? I go, well, I didn't get prison. This is my sentence. He goes, well, that's too bad. I go, why? He goes, white-collar prison. He goes, man. He goes, all kinds of interesting people in there. You meet mayors, you meet doctors who defrauded Medicare, business executives. He goes, they have an activities director. And I'm like, well, what about in here? He goes, whole different class of people. Very interestingly, in a confinement center, you get the whole gamut of criminals. Not white-collar guys, but drug smugglers, coyotes, armed robbers, murderers, rapists, people who have basically done their time and they could have been in maximum security prison, but before they get back on the street, they go to the confinement center as a kind of halfway point, transitioning back to society. So here I am, essentially, well, a room a little smaller than this one, sleeping on bunk beds with hoodlums, a lot of them, for 8 months. Now, admittedly, for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was very much to myself. I noticed that there was all kinds of groups and gangs in there, and a very complex ecosystem. Most of these guys were Hispanic, but even among the Hispanics, there's a big division between the Mexicans and the American Hispanics. The Mexicans are, they have their own groups, and the American Hispanics, they're called Southsiders, they have their own groups. So I was a little bit apprehensive. I mean, I didn't want to sit with this guy because I might upset that guy. I did think of starting my own gang, the Asian Indian gang. But after a little while, I thought to myself, wait, you know, I'm a conservative in a very unusual place. I mean, I'm not likely to run into other conservatives around here. I'm not going to spot Charles Krauthammer down the hallway or George Will. So I thought to myself, let me try to talk to these guys and learn something. And over a period of months, I think I have got a pretty good understanding of what I'm going to call the ideology of the criminal underclass. Now, my previous exposure to this group was basically limited to 2 or 3 viewings of The Shawshank Redemption, in which I pretty much had the idea that most of these guys profess insistently their innocence. But one thing I learned over several months in talking to these guys is that this is not quite right. The criminals in there basically do not say that they're innocent. They admit they're guilty. Their view is, we did it. We're guilty. But we are the small fry. We're actually the stupid criminals. We're the guys who got caught. The big fry never get caught. The big fry are actually out there. They are at large. And the big fry are very rarely pursued by the system for the simple reason that they run the system. Now, initially I thought that this was a bizarre way to think, but I realized that it's essentially a restatement of the philosopher Machiavelli. So Machiavelli's view is that Machiavelli is writing about the ancient thinkers, Plato, Aristotle, and so on, and he says that their mistake, their problem, is that they constantly write, he says, about imaginary powers and principalities that have never in truth been known to exist. And what Machiavelli means is that very often we focus on the world as it ought to be. Things ought to be this way, things ought to be that way. But Machiavelli's view is, let's for a moment focus on the world as it is. Let's look reality in the face without flinching. We don't do this. And as I lay in my bunk bed in this confinement center, I'd listen to these criminals, these hoodlums talk, and I realized they live at the very elemental level. Their conversation focuses on food and sleep and money and sex, and that's pretty much it. Their view is that ultimately human nature is driven by elemental motives. Now, this is actually very eye-opening for me. For 25 years or more, I've actually been living in, I would say, the intellectual precincts of American life, which is to say the National Review, Dartmouth College, the White House, the American Enterprise Institute, the Hoover Institution at Stanford. And if you read all my books about America, you might say that they are about America understood through the lens of ideas. America is a kind of a debate between the liberals and the conservatives. And the liberals believe this, and the conservatives believe that. And the liberals believe in equality, and the conservatives believe in liberty. And we believe in equality of rights, and they believe in equality of outcomes. So we're fighting ultimately for 2 different conceptions of America. Now, I have to tell you, in all honesty, that this whole way of thinking is from the point of view of the criminal underclass, pure and total bullshit. In other words, from their point of view, people are not actually motivated in life by a desire to debate. People are actually motivated by avarice and greed and lust and revenge and hatred and envy, and these are the real motors of human experience and of politics. And any attempt to understand politics that ignores this is essentially shouting in the wind. And so I then began to try to absorb this way of thinking and apply it to the world outside of the confinement center and look in a way at American politics in the eye. And what I'd like to do briefly tonight is to give you a little bit of that way of thinking about politics now, and then look in a very practical way at what you can do to make a difference. It's one thing to say we need to make a difference. It's one thing to say we should unite. It's one thing to say let's do this and let's do that. Let's do what? What is it that I can do now to actually change the levers of power? How can I move the dial myself? I think that there's a way to do it, even for this group right here in this room, to make a huge difference. And I want to leave you tonight by saying how. Now, I want to begin by talking a little bit about the world of politics, and I'll begin a little bit with Obama, because One of the reasons we're in this predicament, this whole big political mess, is because of the radical changes that have occurred in this country over the past 2 terms of Obama. And as conservatives, we've been looking at Obama, and for 8 years we've been conducting what I want to call the Obama Education Project, which is to say our basic assumption is that Obama doesn't get it. He doesn't understand the world. Our job is to educate him. So we keep doing this. We do it to talk radio, Fox News Channel, and on, and we're like, Obama, listen, Vladimir Putin, you know, he used to be a KGB officer. Did you know that? Obama, please take note when the mullahs say that they want to build a bomb. They probably do. Hey, Obama, confiscatory tax rates, they're probably not a very good idea in stimulating employment and economic growth. And on we go with this Obama Education Project, and we've discovered over 8 years that he is an extremely slow learner. Now, this is not because Obama doesn't get it. It's really because Obama is up to something else. So what is that something else? Not just Obama, Hillary, what are these people up to? What is their deal? Or to use the language of the confinement center, what's their racket? Now, in order to understand their racket, one of the things I learned in confinement is that all crime at the root is about theft. Theft. Murder is about theft. If a guy is trying to rob a grocery store and the clerk tries to stop him and he shoots the clerk, theft is his real motive. Rape is about theft. It's about taking something that doesn't belong to you. Now, if you want to understand the theft, the first question to ask yourself is, what is the most important thing that the world has ever produced? Is it the telegraph, the automobile, the airplane, the computer? No. The most valuable thing the world has ever produced is the United States of America. Why? Because the United States is actually a mechanism for producing wealth. It is a wealth-creating machine. The United States is about the invention of invention, a system that generates innovation and technology and wealth. And if you put all that wealth together, it's about $90 trillion. That is the wealth of the whole country. If you add up all the land and all the oil and all the money in everybody's bank accounts and you put it all together, it's $90 trillion. That's one big pile of dough. Now, the big argument in American politics is very simple. Who controls that? Who gets to deploy that wealth? Traditionally, the answer is really simple. It's the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is the guy who creates wealth. And the most successful entrepreneurs in America don't just respond to demand. They anticipate demand and create products that satisfy the demand even before the demand even exists. So if you think of something like the iPhone in your pocket, nobody wrote Steve Jobs and said, hey, Steve, great idea. Listen, build a phone and put apps and then let me go on the internet and do this and do that. No, he thought of it, he made it, and he marketed it before you knew you couldn't live without it. So that's the genius of the supply side, which is to say that supply precedes demand and anticipates demand. So if Obama is not a community organizer, what is he? What he really is, in my view, is he is a resentment organizer. He knows how to massage the deep inner feelings of resentment and direct them politically. Now, resentment is rooted in envy. Think of a guy who works in an office building, adding up numbers or scrubbing office floors, and his house is underwater, and he's got credit card bills, and he's going home, and he peeks into a restaurant in Boston or in St. Louis or here in the Research Triangle. He sees all kinds of people eating steaks and pouring wine, and beautiful cars are pulling up, and he's filled with that incredible feeling of envy. Envy, the most secretive and indeed the most destructive of all human emotions. Because think about it, no one ever admits envy. Not only to other people, you don't even admit it to yourself. No one looked in the mirror and said, "There stands an envious man." Envy is not only the most secretive, but it's also, in a way, the most disgusting of all human emotions. It has no redeeming quality of good in it at all. By the way, if you think of all the other vices, the 7 deadly sins, almost all of them have some admixture of good. Consider anger, which is one of the deadly sins. And yet, Aristotle says that to be angry with the right man at the right time and in the right way and for the right reason is a good thing. Envy is often confused with jealousy. But jealousy actually, on the balance, is not entirely bad. Jealousy has a redeeming aspect to it. You can see this if you think for a moment about the play Othello. Othello, the hero of the play, is jealous. Why? He thinks his wife is having an affair. She's not. But if she were, he would be right to be angry. Why? Because jealousy is being angry at being deprived of something that you have a right to. Envy is being angry at being deprived of something to which you have no right. And so if you consider Iago the villain of the play, Iago says of Cassio, another character, "He hath a daily beauty in his life that makes me ugly." So what has Cassio done to Iago? Nothing. But just by being a better guy and a good guy and a decent guy, Iago hates him and wants to destroy him, and does. This is envy. And so envy is a very powerful force in our society. Envy is not to be confused with emulation. The guy standing outside the restaurant, if he goes, "Hey, look at all those successful people. That's great. I should learn from them. That guy started a new app. That guy thought of a new business. That guy went back to school. Why don't I go back to school? Why don't I think of new ideas?" That's not envy. Envy is, I would like to pull myself up, but since I don't know how to do that, I would be really happy to see that guy pulled down. That's the essence of envy. And so here's this envious guy, smoldering in his own resentment and hatred, when who should come galloping up to him but a man on a white horse who dismounts, bearing the name tag community organizer, the Obama type. And what the Obama type says to him is, in effect, "Listen, my friend, you are misunderstanding your situation. You're not really envious. You're righteously indignant. Because you see all those people in that restaurant? They have been stealing from you. They are in possession of your stuff. The good news is that all you have to do is to vote for me. Me and my friends, we're going to go in there and take their stuff. And then we're going to give some of it to you." Now, we're not confiscating their property. We're merely restoring stolen goods to their rightful owners. We're doing this for social justice. This is the game that is being played in American politics today. There's, in my view, a hidden fight between the wealth creators. I don't just mean the entrepreneurs, I mean everybody who works to create wealth, on the one hand, and on the other hand, a powerful alliance, not just of politicians, not just of community organizers, but very powerful people in academia, in the media, in Hollywood. All those people have a desire to control those same levers of wealth that drive the American economy. What I'm saying to you is that the progressive agenda is not to raise your taxes. It's to take your wealth. It's to take the wealth of the entire country. It's to steal America. Now, to take your wealth doesn't mean, this is not socialism. These people are way too lazy to be socialists. Socialism actually means that the government or the workers control the means of production. So socialism means the government would have to go and drill for oil in Midland, Texas, and take it out of the ground. You think Bernie Sanders wants to do that? He doesn't know how. He doesn't care. He wants you to take it out of the ground, put it in a barrel, label it, and then he'll tell you what to do with it. So the progressives want to control the wealth after the wealth creators have made it. Now, I want to pivot because my time is limited. I want to talk a little bit about what do we do about this very bizarre situation that we're in which, in a sense, our whole American dreams are at stake. Now, we tend to focus, and rightly so, on the coming election. The presidential election, 2 years ago it was the congressional election. But see, everywhere I go, people are like, hey Dinesh, what do you think of Trump? What do you think of Cruz? What do you think of Rubio? 2 years ago, you think the Republicans are going to take the Senate? Will we have both houses of Congress? Well, we have both houses of Congress. Medians would make them a laughing stock. They would become such objects of ridicule that we, our own side, would bury them. And they know that. Another way to put it is what I'm saying is that over the past 25 years, the left has actually colonized all the major megaphones of our culture. Megaphones are large mechanisms of getting the word out. And so Hollywood and Broadway and the media, the mainstream media, and the comedy shows. I mean, they've got Bill Maher, they've got Colbert, they've got Jon Stewart, we've got nobody, nobody, and nobody. It's a very one-sided battle. And then they have elementary and secondary education and higher education. And the more elite the college, the stronger their stranglehold on it. And so what's happened is that we have been fighting in one tiny corner of the battlefield, and they have, as I say, ascended and grabbed a hold of the very powerful mechanisms of getting information out to people, and especially to young people. Again, how do we begin to fight this? Now, I do want to mention a couple things very specifically. You know, right here in this room, 600 people, there's an enormous amount of concentrated power. A lot of it unused. Unused in part because it isn't mobilized, or you're not sure how to deploy it. In order for power to be effective, it has to be deployed in a very laser-like way. I'll give a specific example of what I mean. About a year ago, when my film and book America came out, the retail giant Costco made an executive decision from the top to pull every book of America, my book, from every Costco in the United States. Now, I don't quite know how this happened, but if it happened the way I think, it was a massive strike by the left. Super effective. Somebody complains to Costco, the leaders of Costco are big supporters of the Democratic Party. In any event, they decide, that's it, we're going to pull this guy's book, and I'm a writer, so if Costco pulls my book and Barnes & Noble pulls my book, well, how do I sell books? And I don't even know about this. Well, a journalist finds out about it, and he writes an article on a website called WorldNet Daily. Costco censors book by immigrant, praising America. And there's a big hubbub about it. There are about 1,000 people who are railing on Costco on the WorldNet Daily website. I call this an online mob. But it's an online mob that is super ineffective because it's an online mob in the wrong place. Costco doesn't care about WorldNet Daily. This would be like writing a letter to Costco 25 years ago or 15 years ago, they'd throw it in the wastepaper basket. That's the end of you. But then somebody in this online mob suddenly has an idea. Why are we here? Let's migrate to the Costco website. A very important moment in the history of social media, because now the snowball begins to roll to Costco, picking up snow along the way, and by the time it gets to Costco, one day later, there are now 17,000 people. Now that's a big number, but not that big. Not that big. 17,000 people. But these 17,000 people in 24 hours destroy the Costco website. And I don't mean they vandalize it. They don't do anything like that. It's just that whenever you click on the customer satisfaction for a pair of jeans or some toilet paper or some Costco wine, it doesn't matter what product, you see very elegant ladies in Florida and Texas and North Carolina cutting up their Costco card and mailing little pieces of it back to Costco, to the CEO. Now, Costco does 1/2 of its entire worldwide business on this site. No business can function when its own customers are in open revolt on its own site. No one will buy a single product. So Costco goes into a panic. They fly me up to Seattle to meet the CEO. The first words out of his mouth is, "Dinesh, you are destroying Costco." I'm destroying Costco. Anyway, to get to the punchline, I get back to San Diego a day later, and Costco has decided to reverse their decision, put all my books back on the shelves, order 25,000 new books. My movie comes out 2 weeks later. Everybody else's movie is on a big table, as you know, in Costco. Costco builds a special stand only for my movie, a special display. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is an example, a textbook example of a relatively small group of people. Costco is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It has among the highest brand loyalty of any company in America. And yet a small group of people applying force at a particular vulnerable point can bring a giant corporation instantly to its knees. Again, the force has to be applied in the right way and at the right place and at the right time. Now, think about education, higher education. What can we do to retake the universities? My answer, nothing. Why? Because there are hundreds of them. If we try to compete with that, we'd have to literally create 300 universities. An impossible task. Now, as conservatives, we can do things about this. We can send speakers, Ben Shapiro, me, to go to campus to speak. But we come in on Tuesday, we leave on Wednesday. But the professors are there every day. The professors assign the reading. They control the students' grades. How can we compete with that? They're not accountable to the legislature. They're not accountable to parents. They're not accountable to the administration. They, essentially, you may say that the liberal professor is grazing unmolested on the American campus. We've got to figure out a way to molest that guy. How? How do we do that? How do we do that? Henry Bessemer, who invented a new way to make steel, the chemist, did a series of experiments to see if his new techniques would actually work. And it was on a small scale, and he tried it out, and he looked at the result, and it dawned on him that it works. And he writes in his journal, he goes, "I could see in my mind's eye the giant iron industry of the world collapsing." And he goes, not all its virtually infinite resources, not all of it, together, all of that was powerless, he says, in the face of the result of my little experiment. In other words, this guy figured out a better way to do things. And he knew that the whole world was going to move in his direction. The point is that we are conservatives, but we are conservatives who are now living in a liberal society. So it's not possible for us to be conservative in the old sense. If we just conserve what's here, we'll conserve liberalism. We have to actually start thinking in a more radical way. We have to start thinking more like guerrillas. Not gorillas, but guerrillas. Ways of subverting the existing order of things, ways of creating new things. I tell young people, they say, well, what institution should I go work for when I graduate? Should I go work for the Heritage Foundation? Should I go work for the National Review? And I go, yes, but ask yourself a little different question. Not what institution should I go work for, but what actually needs to be done. So, for example, you might answer, what needs to be done is we need to have a rising generation of young comedians who can deliver timely news in an amusing and entertaining way so that other young people will listen to them. But that's not joining an institution, because there's no institution right now that's doing that. So this is the supply side. It's anticipating what the demand is and creating new things that don't exist right now. A final example that I think is on point. Everywhere I go, I'll meet Republican women in Texas and California, and they say, Dinesh, what can I do? How can I help? I'm in a blue state. My vote's not going to count. Or I'm in a red state. My vote's not going to count because Texas is going to go for the Republicans. How can I, not we, but me, make a difference? And my point is, you actually can. But again, you have to sort of start thinking a little bit outside the box. Now, I'm making a movie. I'm going to Washington, D.C. tomorrow to release a trailer at CPAC. I'll be on Megyn Kelly on Monday, and we'll play the trailer there as well. And this movie is called, Hillary's America, A Secret History of the Democratic Party. Now, this is a completely untold story in American politics. And it's not just about Hillary. My last movie on Obama was just about Obama, the unknown face of Obama. This is about a whole movement, progressivism, a whole party, the Democrats, and Hillary at the top of it. Now, we'll release the movie the third week of July. It's essentially timed to coincide with the Democratic Convention. They'll be telling their story, and we'll be telling their story in a different way. Now, a movie will open on opening weekend. Here's the point. If you actually go and see our movie opening weekend, you are putting fuel in our rocket. And what I mean by that is, if you wait for 3 weeks and see the movie, it's totally different. Everybody's going to watch our opening weekend. We'll open big. We'll open in 1,500 theaters. But if we do really well, we'll be in 2,000 theaters the next week. If we do poorly, we'll be in 1,100 theaters the next week. So it makes a huge difference when you go. About October, the movie will come out in DVD. Now, this movie, I assure you, is messaging of a kind that will never come out of the Republican National Committee. It's a completely different way of communication. And so, as I say, we've got these Republican groups in Malibu and in Texas, and what I say to them is, okay, I understand California is a blue state, and I understand Texas is a red state, but let me tell you this. There are about 1 million people in Florida and in Ohio, some in North Carolina, some in Colorado. These are the independent voters who will swing the election. Happily for us, their names and addresses are completely known. We have them. So I can't do this, but what you can do is you can decide as a group, we're going to put 50,000 DVDs in the hands of independent voters in Ohio. You can do that. And actually, if you, by the scale of American politics, you can do that for an absurdly low price, which is to say pennies on the dollar. The Republican Party will spend hundreds of dollars on trying to get a single vote. For pennies, you can actually drop a bomb into the hands of the very guy who's going to decide the next election. You can do that. And a small group of people can do that effectively. And it doesn't take, when I'm talking about going to a movie on opening weekend, I'm not asking you for $500 or $5,000. It's $10 to buy a ticket. And if you buy a bunch of tickets for young people or high school students, again, this is a way to multiply the fuel in our rocket. People say, how do you get your movie to independent voters? That's how. By making it go to multiple theaters where it penetrates small towns, and ordinary guys who wouldn't normally see it now can. Now can. Now the Democrats play for keeps. We tend not to. This is, by the way, the problem on our Supreme Court. The problem isn't that we're outnumbered on the court. Even now the majority of appointees have been made by our side. But the difference is that their side can count with Euclidean certitude on their votes. We can never count on our votes. How is Kennedy going to vote? Oh, we got Kennedy. Whoops, we lost Roberts. Our guys are participating in a debating society, what Judge Bork called an intellectual feast. Their side is coming to a knife fight. So there's a complete difference of commitment, savagery, and ruthlessness between us and them. We simply are outmatched on that score. One final thought, and then I close. Years ago, a professor of mine told me the story about the lion tamer and the lion. So here's the lion, and here's the little lion tamer with his little stick, and he twirls his stick, and the lion obediently does gestures and machinations in response to the lion tamer. And now my professor poses an interesting question. Who is actually more powerful, the lion tamer or the lion? Well, it's obviously the lion. But now we have a mystery. If the lion is more powerful, why is the lion so sycophantically and obediently responding to the lion tamer? And the reason, of course, is that the lion doesn't know its own power. The lion thinks the lion tamer is more powerful. And that's us, the American people. We think that these politicians, Obama, Hillary, they're super powerful. They've got it all under control. Actually, no. Because their scam, their theft scheme operates within democratic politics. It actually needs our collusion for it to occur. So they're not actually the most powerful. We are. But we often don't know our own power. And so my message to you here tonight is that this is both a terrifying, but also, I think, a thrilling moment in America, a time when we as American citizens have got to come to recognize creatively our own power, and if we do that, then we can be one of those very small groups of Americans through American history who were called upon to do something new and something different to rescue their country. It happened at the founding, it happened at the Civil War, it happened in World War II. Now is our moment, now is our time, now is our opportunity to rescue our country. Thank you very much. Thank you.